And Emily, you were talking about the rise of the smaller parties and the impact that obviously they could have on this election. Are the policies of the smaller parties cutting through, or is it still this sort of visceral sense from a lot of voters that I'm sick of the main parties, I'm sort of turning towards the smaller parties without necessarily the issues being completely clear?
I think that's a big part of it. I think we've got to understand that mainstream parties are obviously not doing enough to win people over at the moment. Liberal Democrats are polling particularly badly. They're in government. Their polls are not looking good. But to have 33 or 34% for the Tories and Labour to be hovering on that, it's not good. And as Kate said today, with this Labour and Tory MP caught on camera today, that doesn't look good. Even if they haven't broken any rules, they're looking for more money outside their MP's salary, and a lot of voters will think, well, hang on, why do I need to elect an MP that wants more? Then I just want them to serve me and get their MP's salary. So I think there's a lot of reasons why people are turning to the other parties. But we've seen today that UKIP has launched its new health policy, and it's just trying to prove itself as it's not just a party about immigration in Europe. Look, we understand other issues as well. We want to cut hospital parking charges. We want more cash for dementia. All these parties now are trying to set out their stalls with all these different issues.
And is it possible, Kate, to get a sense of voter engagement with politics and whether it's on the increase because there is this, changing picture with the smaller parties? I guess I'm thinking, sort of looking back to what happened with the Scottish referendum, the engagement in that was massive. Would you expect there to be a bigger popular engagement in the general election? Is there any fallout from that, or does it just not follow and we might still see a general election with a very low turnout again?
It's interesting. I mean, all the psephologists have always argued that voter turnout dropped when everybody knew who was going to win, when it was really obvious that Tony Blair was going to win, and they were kind of okay with that. And the closer the election is, the higher the turnout gets. I mean, that said, I walked past a chip shop in Edinburgh the night before the Scottish referendum and heard two people having a discussion about OECD reports. So I'm not really sure that we're going to reach that kind of level of engagement. And certainly, ideas of 85% turnout are completely off scale. We're looking at something in between 60 to 65. But of course, this is hugely worrying for all the parties. Turnout could actually have an effect. It could be, this is turning out to be incredibly close, even in terms of who gets enough across the line to make a majority with a coalition with another party. So, voter turnout could be huge here. And I think it's really interesting what UKIP are doing today. They're some of the smaller parties have clearly realised that they've got quite a few problems. They may be polling very well, but it's very hard to pick up seats. And so they're having to try and address issues like health to try and win over those Labour voters as well as Conservative voters in the seats that they're targeting in the south of England. But I'm not sure it's going to be enough.
But that is the point with UKIP polling, 16%, I think that poll said recently. It doesn't necessarily transfer into seats. They've got 2 at the moment. They'll probably be, we're talking about 650 different races. So really the polls don't really mean anything in terms of representation in Westminster. Unless, it means that Tories don't necessarily get their seats because UKIP's pinched their vote.
Let's talk about the tone of the campaign. There's an ad campaign out today, which is, I think we're going to take a look at that in a minute. But let's hear actually first of all from Nigel Farage, because he's actually been saying that he's starting to feel a bit sorry for Ed Miliband.
It is just paragraph after paragraph of total negativity and ad hominem attacks. And I feel that perhaps is the problem with the newspapers and the problem with politics and the problem with the current debate in Britain. It's becoming horribly negative. I am saying that I'm not a supporter of Ed Miliband's politics, but I think he is getting such a doing over every single day that I think it's going beyond the bounds of fairness, yes.
We always hear this, don't we? We hear everyone decrying negative campaigning. It's inevitable, isn't it?
I think it is. I mean, do you remember William when he was mocked up as Margaret Thatcher back in the day? That wasn't particularly nice, and Conservatives just coped with it, and now they're kind of hitting back a bit by putting these ads on YouTube. These paid-for political ads are banned on TV. You get the election broadcast, but there are certain regulations for those. On YouTube now, the Conservatives have a bit of money, have more money than Labour to campaign, and they're putting these YouTube ads out, and one of them shows Ed Miliband and Alex Salmond and even Jerry Adams outside Number 10 saying, this is the nightmare scenario, you vote Labour and this is the kind of rainbow coalition you're going to get. And, you know, Labour can't really do much about that because they don't have the money to then put their own attack ads back out.
Let's have a look at one of the ads that's gone out. And this is very similar to an ad that was used in Australia. This is actually current Conservative ad there targeting Ed Miliband. I think we can have a look actually at a previous one. This is from Australia. This is almost identical, 2004 Liberal Party ad, and it's the common denominator between these two ads is apparently Linton Crosby, Prime Minister's advisor in this election campaign. I mean, is that an egregious example of negative campaigning, would you say?
I think it's very difficult at the moment, because I think what even kind of political strategists are failing to catch up with is how quickly these things can take off. And so you used to be able to do these kind of campaigns and it wouldn't really come out that you actually used all the same tactics 10 years beforehand in Australia. But you just don't really kind of get away with that
I mean,
anymore.
actually, it wasn't that negative, was it? It was a sort of lot of sentences about, here's our record, don't trust the other guy.
I guess it can look a little bit embarrassing. It can look a little bit inept and a little bit unambitious, just to kind of, you know, transplant something from Australia and bring it in now. I mean, I think all the political analysts would say, you know, the issue with negative campaigning is it works, except when it doesn't. And so, you know, when you've had these issues before, and we've certainly had attack ads that haven't worked in the UK before, I think in a sign of how difficult and strange this election is, I've had a few Labour MPs now in very specific seats suggest that maybe this kind of thing is not actually that bad for them, because people can't throw at them, well, you're all the same as the Tories anymore, because the Tories are clearly going all out for them, and vice versa.
That is true, and also the problem with making, you know, really concentrating on Ed Miliband's image, and, you know, he's laughed at himself on Bacon Sandwich and his voice and everything else. The trouble is, if you keep going for him, he becomes a bit of an underdog. And if he's on the front of the tabloids day after day and he's on these adverts, people suddenly think, well, hang on a minute, what about the issues? It can backfire if you force the issue too much.
OK, well, still all to play for. Still a lot of time to go, well, relatively. But thank you both very much for coming in and talking through the state of the campaigns today. Emily, Ashton